Oral Turinabol was part of the original doping program, and it was replaced by Trenbolone after the 2012 London Games. And that's actually correct, and it's actually very interesting because you would think oral Trenbolone has no bioavailability whatsoever. It's not actually the case. What's up guys, Derek, moreplates.com. Today we're going to be talking about the drug combination, the Duchess cocktail. This is a potent blend of steroids designed specifically to enhance performance but evade detection in the Olympic Games. So this is famously what was used in the 2014 Olympic Games by the Russians to help evade detection. And if you find any of my content on doping, performance enhancing drug use in, mixed martial arts, professional, well, obviously that's a sport, you know what I mean? Like traditional professional sports, NFL, NBA, football, soccer, whatever the fuck, anything of that nature, you should watch Icarus. If you have not, this is kind of the time frame I'm going to be digging into right now, because this is specifically the drug cocktail used by the, chemist that is the guy who basically headed their state-sponsored doping program, where he would basically help the athletes sauce up and avoid detection. So anyways, what came out, following the digging into that stuff, notably in Icarus, which kind of uncovered this crazy, background clusterfuck of doping in Russia, was this thing called the McLaren Report. And the McLaren Report summarized the results of an independent investigation into doping by Russian athletes in the 2012 London and 2014 Sochi Games. And this came out a few years ago. You might have heard about it on Rogan. Not a lot of people have talked about it, surprisingly, on YouTube, considering it was I found it incredibly interesting. I can't believe nobody's made a video specifically on the Duchess cocktail, but here we are. So, commissioned by WADA, it reveals an unprecedented level of manipulation of drug tests and implicated 1,000 athletes across a number of sports. The first part of the report, which was released in July, and this was a few years ago, resulted in the ban of 108 athletes from the Rio 2016 Summer Olympics. It's reasonable to believe the number of banned athletes is going to multiply in the wake of the second report. So I'm going to be getting into the actual drugs used, why they were chosen, etc. Just let me give the context here before we get into the juicy stuff. No pun intended. So, let's see. It was a cover-up that evolved from uncontrolled chaos to an institutionalized and disciplined medal-winning conspiracy, the report's author Richard McLaren told reporters. So, while a big part of the scandal itself for cheating in the Olympics was enabled by urine swapping. So if you haven't watched Icarus, like I said, go watch that. You can see how they made that happen without getting caught. It was quite the elaborate procedure involving tampering with samples, as well as just replacement of the dirty ones. But basically, the report also credited the success of the corruption to the introduction of a short-lasting cocktail, which is a thing we're going to be discussing, titled Duchess, which aided athletes in avoiding detection during testing. So in the 2012 London Games, they relied heavily on Oral Turinabol. So this is kind of where T-ball got its famous reputation in sports and became looked at as a performance-enhancing aid across many different sports, professionally, because it was, seen as this compound that had basically broad spectrum effects in terms of its ability to drive motor neuron recruitment, help just overall performance in a myriad of different ways, but with a relative lack of increased body weight. It's not a potent substrate for aromatase. It's not going to crank your body weight up like Dianabol or something, even though they're chemically very, very similar to one another. In addition to that, it was very, quick to get out of your system until the guy who actually headed the, doping program developed a test that sort of figured out how to detect the long-term metabolites of it. And this is where you get into the, the John Jones scandal, where he, had these long-term metabolites in his urine, popping over and over again. Whereas prior, they weren't able to dig into that shit. And people started popping for Turinabol like crazy. That otherwise would have got away with it just fine. So anyways, that was in the 2012 London Games when Turinabol was, heavily used. But moving forward, they had to switch to something even shorter acting. And this is the Duchess cocktail. It was a combination of 3 different steroids, and I will break them down shortly. And the administration technique used is very, very interesting and sort of circles all the way back to my video on sublingual anadrol administration. So basically how they made it work was they would mix these 3 steroids in like a legitimate like cocktail. They would swish it around their mouths, in their cheeks, and basically absorb it through the membrane in the mouth. So basically, the reason you wouldn't, they didn't inject it, they didn't take it orally, they swished it around is because they would absorb a little bit through the mucosal membrane, get it right into the bloodstream, and basically it would almost like resemble like IV administration in terms of its pharmacokinetics, and it would be in and out extremely quick and skip the first pass effect that would otherwise create a shit ton of metabolites that last for a longer amount of time in the body and allow you to get away with, microdosing oral steroids while skipping a significant part of the metabolism process that would otherwise occur with oral administration, where you have much longer detection windows with potentially much higher proportions of certain metabolites being created in the liver. So it's interesting because a lot of these articles don't really even get the compounds right. Like for some reason, none of them even could follow the story properly to understand what was actually happening here. So the chemical names get mixed up a lot, but I'll break down near the end exactly what they were, what, the mistakes made and shit. So obviously the cocktail wasn't, you're not immune to getting detected. There's still a window of time at which you can be detected. It's just, it becomes a lot easier to avoid detection when you significantly shorten the window. The drug burden on your body is significantly lower. You can get it in and out of your system in an acute time frame. And remember what I mentioned, if you watch the anadrol video, if you do sublingual or buccal, you can get away with a disproportionately higher spike in blood serum concentrations of the drug, get an aggressive performance enhancing benefit in a shorter, more condensed time frame, and then clear it out of your system much faster with a relative lack of spiking up all the long-term metabolites. So this is what was leveraged in this cocktail to basically get acute performance benefits, shortened testing window, less long-term metabolites. It's almost like the strategy an ideal like bodybuilder might take to like leveraging pre-workout orals or something like that. So obviously you're not worried about detection when you're going to hit your fucking deadlift or whatever, but it's like the same sort of strategy in terms of manipulating the pharmacokinetic profile of the drugs in question. So after they started to dig into it, by the way, like the urine swapping was still necessary, like I mentioned, just because you have a more condensed time frame. It's not like you're immune to getting, detected. There's still, it's just a shortened window. Whereas otherwise you would have several weeks of detection. It might be condensed down to like 3 to 5 days, which is what we're going to be getting into now, which is the actual combination used. So in the Russian doping scandal, months before the Rio Games, the Rio Olympics, Russia's former anti-doping lab director told the New York Times he covered up doping at the 2014 Sochi Games. Here we look at the drugs allegedly used. So first we're talking about testosterone here as the base androgen and kind of what the anabolic steroids all kind of derive from. And this is something I've broken down in the anabolic steroid family tree videos before and whatnot in terms of each like subclass of compounds and where what kind of interactions they have in the body, how they kind of enhance performance in different ways than one another. But anyway, so the Duchess cocktail, this graphic, the thing I found interesting was how it was incorrect. So this is, I'm going to be correcting it, but this is the best graphical graphical representation I could find of the cocktail. So I'll break it down and then I'll tell you what the actual compounds were. So Oral Turinabol was part of the original doping program, and it was replaced by Trenbolone after the 2012 London Games. And that's actually correct. And it's actually very interesting because you would think oral Trenbolone has no bioavailability whatsoever. It's not actually the case when you are literally swishing it around in your mouth, getting it absorbed sublingually, buccally, whatever it is. It can yield performance enhancing advantage, and it's not going to be just degraded into nothingness. It actually will have a significant effect. Well, a decent enough effect for it to be worth using, of course. And Trenbolone's a very, very potent, if not one of the most potent anabolic androgenic steroids, as you probably already know. And oxandrolone. as you probably know, Anavar. So not to be confused with oxymethylone, which is actually anadrol. I used to always get these confused too. So oxandrolone is Anavar, oxymethylone, anadrol. We're talking about Anavar here. And then mithasterone. So if you don't know what mithasterone is, it is the chemical name for Superdrol. So yeah, we're talking about literally the pro-hormone that was the most abused in high school from GNC over the counter, being used in the exact same time pretty much for, well, I guess, some years later actually, in the Olympics. However, this is what was incorrect. If you actually dig into some of the conversations with the, I forgot how to pronounce this guy's name. It's Rodchenkov. And by the way, like if you want to see this guy's history in terms of the doping program, how he helped, facilitate this thing for Russia and whatnot, and where he's at now after Icarus. Like seriously, if you haven't seen Icarus, go on Netflix tonight and watch it. You'll be fucking baffled. It's insane. So basically when he provided accounts of what is in the Duchess cocktail, supposedly he was inconsistent in what he reported. It's really easy to get these compounds mixed up, honestly. Like when you're not talking about the brand name and you're actually talking about the chemical name, it can get kind of confusing because most of us just refer to these things as Deca, D-bol, Tren, like whatever it is. You don't actually think of it in the name like, nandrolone. You don't think, well, like some of us do, but a lot of people think of it as Deca. And this is why so many people in my video about anabolic steroid family tree, they always ask, where's Deca? And it's an ester, guys. You already know that by now though. So like nandrolone, methandrostenolone or methandienone, like however you want to fucking say it. Like there's different even chemical names for the chemical names. Like methasterone, like you're probably not, Superdrol, like are you going to remember it's called methasterone? And then also that Primo, which is like almost the same chemical name, is called methenolone, and also metenolone. Like, you might mix them up pretty fucking easily. And I think maybe whoever was like writing it down from when he said it was, might have mixed it up themselves, because it's not very hard to mix these up. So anyways, they're basically blaming it on the literal doctor himself, saying that he said it was trenbolone, Anavar, and Superdrol. And he subsequently, and without any explanation, changed the description to trenbolone, Anavar, and Primobolan. Primobolan is an entirely different steroid with different chemical properties to Superdrol. So that is notable. So the actual Duchess cocktail was a mix of oral trenbolone, oral Anavar, and oral Primobolan, which is a very interesting combination, but largely chosen not necessarily specifically because it drives the exact effects they want. Rather, it is because it has the most shortened testing window that you could aggressively condense into an acute time frame, along with the hybrid, performance outcomes and whatnot. So it's not always just like, what's the best compound we can use? Because a lot of the time it's, what can we use that's still going to provide benefit but not be detectable? So, as Turinabol started to gain a bunch of hype and being abused, obviously longer metabolite testing was being developed to detect it for longer periods of time. So then you have to start to be a bit more creative in how you fucking do shit. And then that's sort of where the Duchess cocktail comes in. And then after this got figured out, obviously, the detection limits got, they're different now, to say the least. But I thought this was incredibly interesting. Basically, what they did was they mixed the steroids with alcohol so they dissolved more readily. Athletes swished the mixture in their mouths, then spit it out, didn't even swallow it. Absorption through the cheek lining shortened the window during which the steroids could be detected. Detectable for 3 to 5 days. So, I thought this was an awesome graphic. Like even the fucking graphic was worth a video in itself because I really liked how this was put together. And basically what they found was 148 reports by the World Anti-Doping Association for failed tests in 2014. And this is the combination of drugs in question that was being at the front line being used on all their athletes, supposedly for performance enhancement to get that edge on the rest of the competition. And it comes as no surprise that all the gold medals they won in that exact time frame, it was disproportionately higher than in certain Olympics past. And when you're hosting it in your home country, you probably get afforded a bit more leniency in your manipulation practices, as well as what you can get away with and whatnot. So that's exactly what they did, and you can see that all broken down in Icarus. They actually don't talk about the Duchess cocktail in Icarus. They more talk about the urine swapping and stuff like that. But this is sort of like a, circle around way for me to give context into the actual drug choices used in those athletes that were getting their urine swapped and whatnot. Like, they even talk about how they changed the weight with table salt of the clean urine samples to match the exact weight of the dirty urine samples or something like that. And it was all just incredibly interesting. And it all started around this guy Brian Fogel, who was basically trying to do he was an avid cyclist, no pun intended, like an actual fucking bike rider, and he would compete in events, high level cycling events, and he wanted to see what he could bring his performance up to with performance enhancing drugs. And he sort of, had this, he speculated that there was, performance enhancing drugs being used at this level. And, everyone pretty much did. And most people were. And he basically wanted to see, just getting doped to the gills, what would happen to his performance. And while he was doing this with the guy who was, heading the Russia doping program, he just so happened to unveil all this shit at the same time about the Olympic Games and whatnot. It was just this crazy whirlwind of a movie, and I highly recommend you go watch it. And hopefully this was an interesting tag along to that sort of gives some context into the drug selection and, clarify some things, because some of the articles online are just flat out incorrect. It was not Superdrol being used, it was Primobolin. And stuff like that. And Turinabol was actually phased out for oral Trenbolone, and the combination used was indeed Trenbolone, Anavar, and Primobolin. So hopefully you found that interesting. Video is pushing 20 minutes, so I'm going to cut it off here. Thank you guys for watching. Like, subscribe, check out my blog, moreplates.com. Follow me on Instagram, at moreplates_moredates, Facebook, Snapchat, BitChute, Twitter, TikTok, Apple Podcasts. If you want to support the channel, you can check out anything I'm associated with in the video description below. My TRT clinic, Gorilla Mind, nootropic formulas, Gorilla Mode, pre-workout formulas that design myself from scratch, and anything else I'm associated with, it's all in the video description below. Thank you guys for watching. Talk to you soon.